So today we're here with Neil Collins from the Counselling Service, and we're going to talk a little bit about loneliness and how this is affecting students in MIC this year and how we can help, etc. So Neil, how might you know a friend is struggling?
Well, I suppose first it's nice to be here, Róisín. So thanks for the opportunity to have a chat to you.
No bother. Great to work with you.
I suppose like the college is great. At times it's really, really brilliant. But life's curveballs still get thrown at us in college, and we still have to deal with an awful lot. And friendship can play a really key role in helping us deal with the challenges that we might experience in college, or the challenges that we might be experiencing in life. So that's why we just want to have a little chat just kind of around the importance of friendship. So sometimes it's friends that notice first when someone is struggling. Mm-hmm. So things that you might notice might be that your friend's just not really being themselves, that they're kind of pulling away a little bit from the things that they used to enjoy doing, that they're pulling away a little bit from college and they're not going to lectures, that they're not really interested in joining you on nights out and things like that, or the converse that can happen at the moment because we've all been locked away for 18 months. A little bit of recklessness and wildness can creep in as well, and your friend might be kind of knock themselves the other way in going a little bit overboard and that sort of thing. So there's some of the things that you might kind of look out for or notice, that if a friend is kind of struggling, they're just not really themselves anymore.
Mm-hmm. And what should you talk about when you want to support a friend who is struggling?
I suppose the first thing to say maybe is there mightn't be a need to talk about anything. Mm-hmm. Supporting a friend isn't always about talking. And we'll come to the talking bit, but mm-hmm. sometimes supporting a friend is just continuing to include them, continuing to invite them to events, invite them over to your house, continuing to keep up with the things that you enjoy doing together, because sometimes if a friend is struggling and they pull back a little bit, we can take that as a reflection of ourselves or as a reflection on the friendship, and it's not that at all. So one of the big things to do, I suppose, is to continue to include them, because that gives the message that even though you're struggling, I'm still here for you and I still want to spend time with you and stuff.
It's still nice to be included. Yeah, I know that's the thing that I've heard from a lot of people as well, is that I suppose even if you might invite them somewhere and they might say no one time, that's not a universal mm-hmm. negative to, any experience that's happening. So I think that is a very important point, I think, for a lot of young people, is to make sure you keep, inviting people and including them, because they might be going through a hard time, but then, you may help them come out of it by, being in social events and such, I imagine, after that.
And that also gives the message that it's okay not to be okay. Like I cannot be okay and still be included. I don't have mm-hmm. to be a certain way to be included,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. But on the what to talk about, I suppose, mm-hmm. if you do decide to have a talk with your friend, really it's mm-hmm. up to your friend what they talk about. All you can do is let them know maybe that you've noticed that they haven't been themselves. Maybe you've noticed that they're struggling a little bit, and just let them know that you're there to listen as and when they would like to talk. I suppose you don't get to decide the what of what that conversation is.
Yeah, and that's very important, I think, too. And you touched on a point earlier that I think it can be hard for people to understand, but I think it is an important point, is that, if someone is feeling a certain way or they don't want to talk about something, to, I suppose, remember that it's not a reflection of yourself. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, I think that's a big thing I found anyway with young people at the moment. I think that's just an important point that you brought up there, that to remember that if someone is, feeling down or not feeling themselves, to remember that, that might be about you, that, can be about them, and to give them that space to, I suppose, not to project onto them and stuff. And obviously I know nobody's perfect, but I suppose just a reminder in that situation, I guess it's important to say that sometimes you just need to give people space. And I guess it can be the hard thing too, because I suppose as an Irish people, as a culture, want to fix things and mm-hmm. make them better, but I suppose sometimes it can be time that heals wounds, or sometimes people just need that time to themselves to know how they feel, and
you can't fix it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very important point as well, is that everything isn't about being fixed. I suppose mm-hmm. it's about being and feeling those feelings and, figuring a way out, and, feeling how to best help yourself or your friends or your family and such. And you made an important point there as well, as, it's not always about having a conversation and talking, it's about being there. So when do you think you should talk to your friend if you are worried, or when would be a situation that you think would warrant a conversation or starting a conversation about that?
Well, I suppose the when is kind of, if you've decided that you do want to have a chat, and your friend is kind of like, okay, yeah, I would like to have a chat or would like to talk. When is kind of, well, when should you do that? So one thing to bear in mind is when you have enough time to do it. So not when you're kind of, I don't know, sitting outside with 10 minutes to go before a lecture starts, and then you start it, because you have to be careful. If you don't let enough time for the conversation to finish naturally, and you have to cut it short because you're going for a bus or you're going meeting somebody else or something, what message might your friend get from that? They might get the message that what they have to say isn't important enough, or that they don't matter, or whatever. So be very careful that when you choose to do it, you have enough time to do it. The other thing on when then would be, try to avoid having a conversation at times that might be difficult for your friend. For example, if your friend has maybe problems with food, or around kind of food, or disordered eating or whatever, when you're food shopping or when you're going out for something to eat is not the time to have that sort of a conversation. So they're the kind of the two things. You're kind of avoiding triggering times potentially, and also just making sure that you have enough time that the conversation can go where it needs to go,
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think that's something that people probably know, but it's a good job to remind even ourselves, because you kind of think, I think that is really important, that people might think, oh, I have a free 5 minutes, I'll just check in. But it is important to remember to give them that time, so that you're not just checking in for yourself to kind of go, oh yeah, Neil's okay, I've got that, Neil's okay, I'll head off to, that you do give that time. Or even, I suppose, even just to arrange a talk, to kind of go, oh, I heard, you're not really yourself, would you like to talk about it? I'm free at this time. Or, I mean, that's not the ideal way to approach it, but you know what I mean, in that terms of just kind of maybe letting them know that you've noticed a difference. And
you made a good point there too, Róisín. Like, sometimes it can be about relieving our own anxiety around our friend not being okay, and we might try and rush to do that at a time just to go, oh, you're fine, that's great. But sometimes we have to sit with the worry that our friend mightn't be okay until it's a good time to talk.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. And you mentioned there with friends specifically, and within a friendship group, so say if certain friends might have noticed, for example, that another friend, doesn't seem themselves or doesn't seem okay, how might you have shared concerns with others in a friendship group about your friend, about who should have a chat with them, or maybe how to have a chat as a group? Or is it best to chat one-on-one with someone in the group to nominate? Because I suppose it's one thing that people want to be careful with too, that you don't want to be seen discussing someone behind their back, because that obviously has very negative connotations, even if they're discussing how to help them, or how they've noticed that someone isn't feeling okay. I think it's something that a lot of people are conscious of, not to be seen discussing or bitching about someone behind their back, even if they have good intentions. So what would you say would be a good way to go about that if a group of friends notice that someone isn't okay?
Well, I suppose it's going to happen, isn't it? It's going to happen in friendship groups that you might develop. You're not going to be the only one that might notice that your friend is struggling and stuff. But I think it'd be good for someone to take the lead on that. Perhaps the person who is closest to them, or perhaps the person who feels most comfortable doing that. I wouldn't do it as a group. I would certainly suggest that it would be done on a one-to-one. And also to be very mindful about the language that you would use around that. So not to approach your friend and say, we've been talking about, or we've noticed, or whatever. Try and reframe it more like I have, because using the we, I suppose, will do all those things, Róisín, that you talked about, will make the person feel that all my friends are talking about me. They all know that there's something wrong with me. It could damage trust. It could damage, more importantly, it could damage safety, your feeling of safety in your friendship group. So I would suggest one-to-one, and kind of watch the use of the we. And sometimes we can maybe use the we as a powerful thing. If a friend doesn't want to talk about it, you can come in and talk about it. Well, we all think it. And I would urge against that.
And you've touched on this a bit there, but how do you have any tips to keep in mind in how to have that conversation? So say if you are that friend who has taken the lead, and you have decided, okay, I'm going to speak with Neil, he's open to it, we've picked this time, we're going to chat, because I'm sure there's some, people who don't want to, I think language, the irony of me now not being able to get this out, but I think, as you mentioned, the language is very important in how people approach this. So do you have tips on how to kind of start that, or the specific language to use when speaking to a friend who is struggling?
Yeah, I've a few bits around it. I suppose the first thing, I'm conscious that this is starting to feel quite heavy,
Yeah.
So one of the things might be, kind of thinking about where you might have the conversation with a friend, because how that is set up might kind of dictate how heavy it might feel as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's nice to just do something relaxing, like, go for a walk together, or ask them to come over for a cup of tea or whatever, because if it feels very heavy, it could end up being very heavy, so
definitely.
That'd be one thing. Kind of we talked about the when, but the where is important as well,
Yeah.
Also, like the likes of communal kitchens or sitting rooms, they're very comfortable. But you got to think about the idea of people walking in and out and the safety of that.
Definitely. And I suppose if it's not a common ground, so to speak, or if it's not a space, I suppose, that elicits that calmness, there's probably an added anxiety if you're going to meet somewhere that you don't feel safe, or that isn't as comfortable, or as, I suppose, less serious, probably. There's probably a better word to describe than that, but a calming, a more calming presence. So that is a very important point to make as well. I think that the place has as much meaning as the conversation itself.
And sometimes the side to side piece of going for a walk or a drive, or I don't know about you, Róisín, but like back in the day, if I was having a conversation with my mom or whatever, I would always feel more comfortable when in the car, because it's not the looking at each other piece. Some of the heavy, definitely, or some of the intensity may be taken out of it. So doing something that you enjoy doing, or going for a walk or something like that. But as for other tips, I suppose, well, one would be kind of be prepared, kind of maybe have taken down a few little prompts for yourself that kind of what you want to say. I would open questions, so not yes, no questions, but more questions like, what could I do to help support you with that? Really opens it up to a broader kind of an answer. They say to kind of try to avoid why questions sometimes, because they can feel kind of aggressive. So try to avoid why questions.
It links in with what you said earlier as well, as sometimes there isn't, a reason, or sometimes there isn't a fix or something, say, so to speak, like that's exactly, this person feels a certain way because of X. Sometimes these things just happen and people feel this way. So I think that not having the why question also probably has less blame or guilt on a person for their feelings, or the justifying of quantifying and qualifying, well, I feel this way because of X and Y. So I think that's a really good point, to not put the shame or the guilt onto someone for their feelings, and just to let them know that it's okay, and you don't have to justify every feeling that you have. It's okay just to feel how you feel.
And that's really good, Róisín, because they mightn't have a justification for it. They might just feel that way. And that kind of speaks to them not understanding what's happening for them. But what's also important, I suppose, is when you're talking with and supporting a friend, don't feel that you have to understand everything as well. Like, don't feel that you need to understand or grasp exactly what's happening for your friend. Don't feel you need to know the right thing to say, or you need to have the answer, or you need to fix it. You don't. Like, just by letting your friend know that you're there for them and you're willing to take that time to spend with them, that will show them that you care about them, and think you don't have to know what to do.
Exactly. I suppose that's what services like yourself are there for, to, once people have bridged this gap, and so if they, realize they may need to speak to someone, or I suppose having a friend who might encourage another friend to go to counselling, or to go to speak to someone else who is non-biased, or who doesn't have any opinion of a situation before too, because I know sometimes that can be some kind of a problem or an issue with friends, in that sometimes it can be great to speak to someone who knows you and to know yourself, but I think sometimes, I'm sure as you see a lot, there's a lot of freedom in speaking to someone who doesn't have any background, who you can just speak about your feelings and your thoughts about in a completely non-judgmental space.
Yeah, and you're not trying to mind them.
Yeah, that's very true. I suppose in those situations, you're trying to be careful when you tell people what you're telling them, that you don't upset them either.
And on that friend piece, you were saying about encouraging a friend to come up to the counselling service. It often happens that a friend will actually accompany their friend up to the counselling service.
Oh, that's a lovely idea. I think that's really nice
lovely. So if for example, your friend starts to talk to you, and it could happen that what they choose to talk about could feel too much for you to carry, and that of course could happen. Well, then what you might do might be to suggest that they might need to talk to somebody else about this, that they don't feel able for that bit, without frightening your friend or letting them, making them feel shame or guilt.
But that is important. That is important as well, I suppose, to mind yourself as the friend, that you do your bit, but then I suppose to refer your friends to a professional service or to someone who may be able to help them better, and to mind yourself as well, to ensure that you're not taking on too much as well, because I think that could be, another cultural Irish thing as well, of the mammy friend trying to look after everyone, but I suppose the importance of looking after yourself as well, so you can be there for your friend and for yourself. And
it's about the word boundaries is kind of important. It's about kind of knowing your boundaries around what you're comfortable taking on, but also respecting the boundaries of the person talking. So for example, they might have decided to tell you, but they mightn't be ready for anybody else to know, so, but also that piece of offering that if they do want to tell another friend, that you might accompany them. If they want to tell their mom or their dad, if that be relevant, you might accompany them, or you might accompany them up here to the counselling service, or to a tutor, or whatever that might be. But that you might be saying, actually, this bit is too big for me to carry, but I'm happy to help you carry it where you need to bring it, Definitely. And I think that really leans into as well a non-judgmental space from your friend, but also letting them know that they're bringing you to another space that won't judge them and can further help them with their feelings, and to let them know that it's okay not to be okay. I think that's really something that we want to get across as well for our Positive Mental Health Week, that, everyone has mental health. It's the same as, not the same, but it's in the same way that everyone has a physical health. So it's just checking in with yourself, and that idea of it doesn't have to be okay all the time either. The sadness and the other feelings, they're normal to feel, and they're okay to feel. And it's important that we know that too. Thank you so much, Neil. Oh, sorry, I'll let you speak. Speaking over you. Apologies. Just on that bit, Róisín, you'd be surprised how many students kind of come to the counselling service and think that they're the only one that comes to the counselling service. And I always kind of say to them, there's 5 counsellors up here now in the counselling service. It's like, we'd all be without jobs if they were the only one who was coming up. So there are an awful lot of students, particularly this year, after the crazy year and a half that we've had, who are finding it really difficult to be back in college. There are the anxious students who feel anxious, who always believed that the world was maybe a scary place, and it's been kind of confirmed, in the last year and a half. So they're finding it really tough to be back. So keep an eye out for that friend, but similarly keep an eye out for the friend who has a potential to be a little bit reckless, because they're going to be way more reckless now that they're back and they're free. So all types of students, I think, are struggling to be back this year. So I think it's really important this year more than any year to keep an eye out for your friends.
Definitely. And thank you so much, Neil. This has been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Róisín.